The knock didn't ask permission. It didn't have to. 2 taps on wood and the whole world tightened like a noose. Naomi sat in a room up north where folks said ma'am like it meant something. Clean floor, quiet air, a table that didn't wobble, a window that didn't have bars. And still, when that knock hit her memory, her throat closed the same way it did back then. Across from her, Mr. Garrett held his pen like it was a key. Like if he wrote the right words, a lock would open somewhere. Quaker hands, ink stains, soft voice. The kind of man who looked like he'd never raised it above a prayer. "Naomi," he said, careful, "I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm trying to get your truth out alive." She didn't look at him. She studied the grain in the table like it could tell her where the pain was buried. That's how it works. Folks think you move on. Like a story can just sit down and behave because you changed cities. But some things don't relocate, they wait. "You want the part they don't name," she said. Her voice stayed even, but her fingers locked together in her lap, tight enough to turn the knuckles pale. "You want the house they pretended didn't exist." Garrett swallowed. He nodded once. Naomi leaned back slow, like she was stepping away from herself so she wouldn't break in half. Then she spoke again, and the room in Philadelphia faded like smoke, because in her head she was 16 again, and the heat in Georgia didn't just sit on your skin. It sat on your fate. She wasn't born into trouble. Trouble was born into her. The kind you don't earn, you inherit. Her mother, Esther, didn't get to grow old. Naomi remembered scraps, a lullaby low in the dark, hands that worked until they cracked, soap that smelled like lie and survival. Then one day her mother wasn't there and nobody asked Naomi what she needed after that. Nobody asked slaves what they needed. The women in the quarters did what they could. They raised each other with whispered rules and hard looks. Don't stare. Don't question. Don't believe kindness is free. And there was another rule they didn't say out loud. Not because they didn't know it, because saying it made it real. When a girl turned 16, the plantation started looking at her different. Naomi didn't understand beauty. Beauty wasn't a compliment where she came from. Beauty was a price tag, it was attention. And attention was danger, so she covered herself the best she could, tied the scarf low, kept her chin down, walked quick, didn't matter. One morning the wrong bell rang, not the bell that meant work, the other one, the bell that meant your day was no longer yours. Tools hit dirt. Cotton sacks got dropped. Bodies turned toward the overseer's place like magnets. Mrs. Calloway stood there like a cold front in a dress, lace handkerchief at her nose, eyes scanning, slow and sharp like she was buying meat. Webb the overseer posted up behind her, heavy shoulders, sunburnt face. That whip on his belt wasn't decoration. He'd tap it when he was thinking, like a man counting options. "Mrs. Calloway didn't speak to the group. She hunted a single target. Her gaze landed on Naomi and stopped. "You," she said. Just one word, but it shoved the air out of Naomi's chest. "Step forward." Naomi moved like her feet belonged to somebody else. She kept her eyes down because that's how you stayed breathing. "How old?" "16, ma'am." Mrs. Calloway circled her, slow, deliberate, like she was inspecting a horse's teeth. "Turn." Naomi turned. "Lift your chin." Naomi lifted it. A long pause. Then Mrs. Calloway glanced at Webb. He gave the smallest nod, a silent agreement between two people deciding what a girl's body was worth. "You'll come to the big house," Mrs. Calloway said, like she was offering a reward. "We need another girl inside. You start tomorrow." If you didn't know the game, you'd think that was luck. No more field, no more sun splitting your back, no more cotton dust in your throat, but Naomi didn't look at the big house. She looked at the women around her, and that's when she understood. No smiles, no relief, no quiet congratulations. The older women's faces went flat like the world had turned to stone. Mama Ruth, everybody called her that though she didn't belong to any one child, grabbed Naomi's arm the moment Mrs. Calloway walked off. She yanked Naomi behind a cabin where nobody could hear them. Her grip wasn't cruel, it was desperate. "Listen," Mama Ruth hissed. "You hearing me?" Naomi nodded, but her mouth wouldn't work. "They ain't bringing you in there to sweep," Mama Ruth said. The words came out sharp, like she was cutting rope before it tightened. "They don't pick girls like you to polish silver." Naomi blinked. "Then why?" Mama Ruth's eyes shined, but she refused to let the tears fall. Pride was all she had left. They pick the ones they can break, she said. The young ones, the ones with no babies, the ones folks look at and forget they're people. Naomi felt her stomach drop. What they gonna do to me? Mama Ruth looked away, jaw trembling like she hated herself for knowing. What they always do, she whispered. And you need to understand something right now. In that house, your no don't exist. You keep your voice small, you keep your head down, and you keep your heart someplace they can't reach. That night, Naomi lay on her pallet staring at the roof slats while moonlight slid through the cracks. She didn't pray for freedom. She prayed not to be chosen. But the plantation wasn't built to answer prayers. It was built to collect them and grind them down. The next day, the big house waited like a white lie standing tall. A man named Peter opened the back door. Black suit, thin face, eyes that looked far away like he'd been staring at the same tragedy for decades and stopped flinching. "You Naomi," he said. "Yes, sir." "You speak when spoken to," Peter told her. "You move quiet. You don't look folks in they face unless they tell you. You follow what you're told." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. Men like Peter didn't carry power. They carried rules. And rules can hurt you just fine. He led her through hallways lined with wealth Naomi wasn't meant to touch. Rugs thick as silence. Paintings of white faces staring down like they owned the air. Doors that closed soft, hiding rooms where decisions got made. Peter stopped at a small door near the kitchen and pushed it open. A closet of a room, a cot, a hook, a window with nothing soft about it. "This yours," Peter said. And then quieter, like he was sliding her a warning without letting it be seen. "You learn fast. You have to." He left before she could ask anything. From deeper inside the house, Naomi heard a woman laugh, high and brittle, like glass about to crack. The kitchen ran hot, grease in the air, heat on your skin. A woman named Dina stood over the stove like she'd been welded to it. Strong arms, hard face, no extra words. "You the new one," Dina said, not a question. "Yes, ma'am." Dina shoved a basket of potatoes and a knife toward her. "Hands busy, mouth shut. That'll keep you alive longer than prayer." Naomi started peeling. Minutes passed, just the scrape of blade on skin and the sound of the pot whispering on the flame. Then Dina leaned in, low enough that the walls couldn't hear. "How old you?" 16. Dina's jaw tightened like she'd bitten down on a curse. "You got anybody?" Naomi hesitated. "Mama Ruth, auntie's, not blood but mine." Dina nodded once. "Then hear me. In this house you do three things: work, watch, and don't catch his attention." Naomi's hand froze mid-peel. "Who?" Dina didn't answer right away. That silence said enough. Finally she muttered, "The master." Naomi swallowed. "What if he calls me?" Dina's spoon hit the pot hard. Not anger at Naomi. Anger at the question being real. "Then you go," Dina said. "Because the only thing worse than him wanting you is you thinking you got the power to refuse." Over the next days, Naomi met the other girls inside. Faces too young to look that tired. Eyes trained to stay blank. One of them moved through hallways like a ghost, light-skinned with a look that carried secrets nobody wanted to claim. Another, older, Clara, folded linens like she'd been folding pain her whole life. Clara didn't waste breath on comfort. She waited until they were alone, hands busy, voices low. "He ain't sent for you yet," Clara said. Naomi's chest tightened. "No." Clara's fingers smoothed a sheet so perfectly it looked like she was pressing a coffin lid. "He will." Naomi tried to speak, tried to ask what to do, tried to find a way out that didn't exist. Clara looked up. Her eyes weren't cruel, they were honest. "When it happens," Clara said, "you keep your tears for later, you keep your fight for somewhere else. You don't give him the sound of you breaking. You let your mind walk away even if your body can't." That night Naomi lay in her tiny room, staring at the ceiling like it held instructions. She counted cracks like Clara said. 1, 2, 20. She stopped at 23, not because she ran out of cracks, but because her hands started shaking and she couldn't hide it from herself anymore. And then it happened, footsteps in the hall, a shadow under her door, then a soft knock, not loud, not rushed, like whoever stood outside already knew the answer. The door opened just enough for Peter to fill the frame. His face was stone, his eyes didn't meet hers. "Master wants you," he said. Naomi didn't move. The air turned heavy, her mouth went dry. "Now," Peter added, like time itself was owned. She stood up anyway because the plantation trained bodies better than it trained minds. Peter stepped back into the hallway. Before he turned away, his voice dropped to something almost human. "I can't save you," he said. Then he walked off, leaving Naomi in the doorway with nowhere to run and a dark corridor waiting to swallow her whole. The hallway felt longer at night. Not because it stretched, because every step took something from her, a little breath, a little hope, a little of that quiet part inside you that still believes somebody might stop this. Peter walked ahead like a man escorting a sentence. No chains, no shouting, just the sound of floorboards complaining under their weight and a clock somewhere counting down to a decision Naomi never got to make. They stopped at a heavy door. Peter didn't touch the handle. He didn't even look at her. "2 knocks," he said. "Wait, when he says enter, you enter. When he says leave, you leave. You don't speak unless he asks." Naomi's throat tightened. "Peter." He cut her off with a small shake of his head, not cruel, just tired. "I told you," he said, almost a whisper. "Nobody helps in there." Then he walked away. Naomi stood alone in front of that door like it was the edge of a cliff. The wood looked polished, expensive, like money had ironed out all the scratches, the kind of door that kept terrible things respectable. Her hand lifted on its own, 2 knocks, silence. Then a voice, smooth and calm, like he was inviting her to dinner. "Enter." Naomi stepped inside. Warmth hit her first, not comfort, control. A fire burned even though the air outside didn't need it. Candles watched from corners. Books lined the walls like proof of intelligence, like learning could wash sin clean if you stacked enough of it. And behind the desk, Elijah Calloway sat like a judge who'd already decided. He didn't rush. He didn't need to. Men like him didn't chase what was already trapped. His eyes moved over her, slow, measured, like he was taking inventory. "Close the door," he said. Naomi did. The click sounded final. "Come here." She moved, each step feeling like a betrayal of herself. She stopped a few feet away, hands clasped tight, eyes low. The way you stand when you're trying to disappear while still being visible enough to obey. Calloway leaned back slightly, studying her like she was a puzzle he enjoyed solving. "You've been in my house," he said, voice even, "and you've done as you were told." "Yes, master." He nodded, satisfied. Then he reached over, opened a book on the desk, one of those holy books people use like shields, and started talking about duty and obedience like he was teaching Sunday school. Naomi didn't listen to the words. She listened to the tone, because tone is the real truth. The tone said, "I can do whatever I want and God will be used as my witness." He stood, came around the desk. His steps were unhurried. When he stopped in front of her, she could smell drink on his breath, tobacco, clean soap, the kind of cleanliness that lives on top of rot. He lifted her chin with 2 fingers, not rough. That was what made it worse. "Look at me," he said. Naomi raised her eyes. And in his gaze there wasn't rage or passion or even cruelty the way people imagine it. There was certainty, the certainty of a man who has never been denied. He spoke again, quiet, confident, laying out rules like he was reading a contract. Then his voice sharpened just a little. "Undress." Naomi froze. The room didn't change. The fire kept snapping. The candles kept flickering. The world kept pretending this was normal. Calloway didn't yell, he didn't threat, he simply waited because time worked for him. Naomi's hands moved at last, shaking as she unfastened what little she wore. Each button felt like a step deeper into a place she might not come back from. When she stopped, Calloway gave one small nod like she'd passed a test. He didn't say much after that. He didn't have to. The power in the room spoke for him. Naomi did what Clara told her to do long before this moment came. She left without leaving. She took her mind and pushed it somewhere far away. Somewhere the air didn't smell like whiskey and control. Somewhere her mother's song could still reach her. When it was over, Calloway spoke like a man finishing business. "You'll return," he said, like the future belonged to him too. "And you won't speak of this, not to anyone." Naomi didn't answer. She just nodded because nodding was how you stayed alive. She dressed with hands that barely worked, then walked out on legs that didn't feel like legs anymore. The hallway swallowed her again. Back in her small room, she sat on the edge of the cot and stared at the floor. The night pressed in, heavy and quiet. She washed in cold water that couldn't wash anything that mattered. When morning came, the bell rang like nothing happened. Naomi dragged herself into the kitchen and started working before anyone could ask why her eyes looked like they'd been emptied. Dina saw her the way women like Dina always see, quick, sharp, no wasted pity. She didn't ask. She just set a cup near Naomi's hand and said, "Work." That was the code. That was the mercy. Days turned into a pattern Naomi hated because patterns feel like permission. Sometimes Peter came for her. Sometimes Calloway let her think she had a night to breathe, then stole it back later. Sometimes Calloway spoke soft like he was generous. Sometimes he treated her like an object he could put down and pick up whenever he wanted. Naomi stopped counting nights because counting makes you hope for an end. And hope can get you killed. Weeks passed. Then one afternoon Clara caught her alone, scrubbing where nobody would notice a stain. Clara didn't soften her face. She didn't soften anything. "You bleeding regular?" she asked low. Naomi's hand slowed. "What?" Clara leaned in. "Your month, has it come?" Naomi tried to think, tried to be sure, but her body had turned into a war zone and time didn't feel reliable anymore. "Late," she admitted. Clara's face tightened, like somebody just handed her bad news she already expected. "How late?" "A week, maybe more." Clara closed her eyes like she was holding back something sharp. When she opened them again, her voice was barely a breath. "Then listen close," Clara said. "If you start showing, she's gonna notice." Naomi swallowed. "Who?" Clara's eyes cut toward the front of the house, toward the woman who ran it in daylight. His wife. Naomi's stomach dropped. Clara's next words came out colder than the water Naomi was scrubbing with. "And when she knows," Clara said, "they don't handle it in the big house." Naomi stared at her. "What you mean?" Clara's gaze slid toward the windows, past the lawn, past the trees. "There's another place," she whispered. "A small house behind the grove, one folks don't name, one folks pretend they never saw." Naomi felt the room tilt. "What happens there?" Clara held her eyes. No comfort, no softness, just the truth. "They erase problems," she said. "And girls like you become a problem the moment your body starts telling the truth." Naomi's mouth went dry. "And if she sends me?" Clara gripped her wrist hard enough to hurt. "Then you better hide it," she said. "Because once that path takes you into those trees, you don't get to decide what comes back out." That night Naomi lay on her cot with both hands pressed flat to her stomach, listening to her own breathing like it might betray her. And somewhere outside, beyond the yard, beyond the lights, beyond the last safe lie this place ever offered, the trees stood still, like they were waiting. By morning Naomi already knew. Nobody had to tell her. Her body spoke in quiet signals you don't misread when you've been trained to listen for danger. The sickness that came before the sun, the heaviness low in her belly, the way her chest ached like it was preparing for something that wasn't allowed to exist. She moved different after that. Slower, careful, like every step might tip something over. She tied her apron higher, ate less, kept her shoulders angled so Mrs. Calloway wouldn't get a full look when she passed. Survival became math, angles, timing, silence, and for a while it worked. Then one afternoon the parlor went quiet in the wrong way. Naomi was dusting a shelf when the room changed temperature. She felt it before she saw it. That presence people like Mrs. Calloway carried, the way air stiffened around them. "Stop." Naomi froze. Mrs. Calloway stood near the doorway, hands folded, eyes sharp enough to cut cloth. "Turn around." Naomi obeyed. Mrs. Calloway stepped closer, too close. Her gaze didn't wander, it hunted, waist, hips, chest. The places Naomi had been trying not to acknowledge herself. "You filled out," Mrs. Calloway said. Naomi shook her head once. "No, ma'am." The slap came fast, not loud, not dramatic, precise. "Don't insult me," Mrs. Calloway said calmly. "How far along?" Naomi tasted blood and iron. Her knees almost buckled. "Answer." "9 weeks," Naomi whispered. "Maybe 10. Mrs. Calloway didn't react the way Naomi expected. No screaming, no hysteria, just satisfaction. "I'll send for him," she said. "Tomorrow." Naomi's heart started racing. "Please." Mrs. Calloway turned, already done with her. "You should be grateful," she said over her shoulder. "Most men would have sold you south by now. My husband is considerate." The word burned. That night Naomi didn't sleep. She sat on the edge of her cot and spoke to her stomach in a voice so low it barely existed. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't know how to protect you." Morning came too fast. Webb found her in the kitchen like he was sent to collect property. No words, just a nod toward the yard. Dina didn't move when Naomi passed, but her hand tightened around the spoon until the knuckles showed white. The path into the trees was narrow and wrong, overgrown on purpose, like they didn't want footsteps remembered. Then Naomi saw it. A squat wooden house crouched in a clearing where the sun didn't fully reach, shutters closed, door dark. No windows welcoming anything back out. Webb knocked once. The door opened. Inside, the air was thick with things Naomi didn't have words for yet. Blood, old sweat, something sharp and sour that sat in the back of the throat. Other women were already there. One curled on a cot, shaking. Another sitting on the floor, staring at nothing, her dress darkened where it mattered. An older woman stood near a table, hands rough, eyes tired. She didn't look surprised to see Naomi. "Lie down," a man said, drunk voice. White man, stained vest, hands that shook just enough to be dangerous. Naomi's legs didn't want to move. The older woman came to her, gentle but firm. "Baby," she whispered, "do what he says." The cot was cold, hard. The man laid out his tools like he was setting a table, metal, glass. Rags soaked in something that stole breath. "This won't take long," he said like he was talking about weather. The world went dark fast. When Naomi came back, pain was everywhere, not sharp, crushing, like something had been hollowed out and left raw. The older woman sat beside her, wiping her forehead. "You still here?" she said softly. Naomi turned her face toward the wall. Her body felt empty in a way she couldn't explain yet. That night she didn't sleep, she listened. She heard the door open, heard footsteps, heard the scrape of metal biting earth outside. 1, 2, 3, she counted until she couldn't anymore. They sent her back after days that blurred together. The big house didn't slow down for grief. Bells rang, pots boiled. Floors needed scrubbing. Naomi returned to work thinner, quieter, hollowed. Master Calloway didn't call for her right away. 6 weeks passed, long enough for her body to heal, long enough for him to decide she was usable again. When Peter knocked, Naomi didn't argue. She didn't plead. She followed. After that, time lost shape. Months passed. Then it happened again. Her body told the truth a second time. This time Naomi didn't hide. When Mrs. Calloway confronted her, the rage came out clean and sharp. Words meant to cut. A slap meant to remind. Dr. Pritchard came again. The house with no name waited again. The third time was different. Dr. Pritchard arrived drunker than before. His hands shook too much. His voice slurred. "Aunt B," she finally told Naomi her name, argued with him in whispers that turned sharp. Naomi lay down anyway, because resistance only made things worse. When she woke screaming. Pain tore through her like something had gone wrong in a way nobody could fix. Blood everywhere, too much. Aunt B shouted. Someone ran, someone cried. Dr. Pritchard fled. Naomi felt herself slipping, the room dimming, the sound of her name stretching like it was being pulled underwater. And in that moment, right there on the edge, Naomi understood something clear and terrifying. If she died here, she would become dirt and silence. Another problem erased. Another name unspoken. She fought to breathe. She lived, barely. When Aunt B told her the damage was permanent, Naomi didn't cry. She felt something else. Relief, cold, heavy, settling. "He can't do this again," Naomi said. "Not like before." Aunt B studied her face, then nodded. "You still got fire," she said. "Most lose it." That night Naomi made a decision. Not loud, not brave looking, deadly quiet. She wasn't waiting anymore, because she could feel it now, clear as footsteps behind her. The plantation wasn't finished with her yet, and next time it wouldn't let her walk back. The thing about cages is once you see the bars, you start measuring the gaps. Naomi moved like a woman already gone, not sick enough to be watched, not strong enough to be trusted. That space right there, that's where escapes are born. She didn't tell Dina, didn't tell Clara, didn't tell Peter. Information was currency on that land, and Naomi was done paying. She waited until dawn, when men trusted routine more than instinct. That's when she slipped past the quarters and found Josiah. Old Josiah was always digging. Didn't matter the day, didn't matter the weather, the earth knew him by name. "You look like death," he said, not unkind. "Feel worse," Naomi replied. He leaned on his shovel, studied her the way men who have buried too much study the living. "You here for truth or help?" "Both." She told him everything, not fast, not dramatic, just clean. The way you lay cards on a table when you already know the outcome matters more than the emotion. Josiah didn't interrupt. When she finished, he nodded slow. "They'll kill you if you stay." "I know." "They'll hunt you if you run." "I know." He tapped the shovel against the dirt. "Then you better not miss." Josiah knew people, Quakers north of here, folks who didn't talk loud but moved fast, folks who hid lives the way other men hid money. 3 nights, he told her, 3 nights to prepare. On the second night, Mrs. Calloway came for her, locked the door behind them. Her grip on Naomi's throat was strong, personal. "I built this," she hissed. "I clean up after him, I decide who disappears." Naomi didn't beg, she spoke names, 47 of them. Mrs. Calloway released her like she'd been burned. "You speak," she said, shaking, "and I will make you die slow." Naomi understood something then. Fear had changed sides. That night she ran, dogs barked, men shouted. The woods tore at her skin, she hit the creek and didn't hesitate. Cold water stole her breath, carried her scent away. She stayed under until her chest screamed. The dogs lost her. By dawn she was north, collapsed at a farmhouse with a lantern burning in the window, safe. Years later, Naomi sat across from Mr. Garrett again. She slid 2 bundles onto the table. Names, dates, proof. "They burned the house down," she said, "but the people stayed free." Garrett closed his eyes. "What do you want done with this?" he asked. Naomi stood. "I want them remembered," she said, "and I want the world to know who paid the price for silence." Outside, the city moved. Inside, something old and buried finally had a voice. And somewhere far south, land that never grew anything waited, because stories like this don't end. They wait, and somebody always thinks they're safe. Until the truth comes knocking. Freedom didn't come with peace. It came with noise. North of the line, Naomi learned that silence feels different when it's not forced on you. At night, no bells, no footsteps outside the door, no man deciding when your body belonged to him, but the quiet didn't rest easy. Because when you've lived inside a system built to erase you, survival alone starts to feel like unfinished business. Mr. Garrett read the names slow, one by one, like he understood that speed would disrespect the dead. 47 women, some gone young, some broken before they ever had a chance to be. "These names," he said carefully, "they'll anger powerful people." Naomi nodded. "They should." He looked up. "Publishing this puts targets on everyone involved. You, me, anyone who helped you." Naomi met his eyes for the first time since she started talking. "I already lived hunted," she said. "This time, at least I get to choose why." The papers moved quietly at first, hand to hand, church basements, small meetings where people spoke in whispers but left changed. Men shifted uncomfortably. Women cried behind gloved hands. Names that had never mattered suddenly had weight, but power doesn't like mirrors. Word traveled south faster than Naomi expected. Someone recognized a name. Someone recognized a pattern. Someone realized a story had slipped its leash. One night, Garrett barred the door himself. "They know," he said. "Not officially, but enough." Naomi didn't panic. Panic was a luxury she'd outgrown. "Then we keep moving," she said. "Stories don't die if they stay in motion." She changed names, changed cities, learned to read, learned to write, learned how to sit in rooms where men argued about morality like it was abstract while she carried receipts in her bones. Sometimes she spoke, sometimes she listened, and sometimes she just watched. Because Naomi had learned something the hard way, power isn't loud, it's patient. It waits for people to get comfortable thinking the danger has passed. Years later, she went back south. Not to stay, never to stay. The plantation was half-rotted. The big house leaned like a liar losing balance. Nature was reclaiming what cruelty borrowed. Behind the trees, the clearing was empty, just dark soil. Naomi knelt and pressed her palm into the ground. It was still warm, still heavy. "They remember," she said softly, "not as hope, as fact. She planted seeds there, not for beauty, for proof, for defiance, for the kind of growth that shows up where it's not supposed to." When she walked away, she didn't look back. Because that's the last lesson Naomi ever learned. You don't survive monsters by begging them to stop. You survive by outliving them. And making damn sure the world knows their names. Somewhere, far away, someone read her story and felt uncomfortable. Good. That meant it was working. And somewhere else, someone powerful felt the floor shift just a little under their feet. And wondered who was watching them now. Years passed. Enough for people to believe the danger had rusted away. That's when it came back. Not with a knock, not with dogs, with questions. Men asking the wrong names in the wrong places. Letters arriving without return addresses. Conversations that stopped when Naomi entered a room. Power has a way of recognizing when it's been wounded, even decades later. Mr. Garrett warned her first. "They're tracing the roots," he said, "not to punish the past, to protect the future." Naomi didn't flinch. She'd been waiting for that sentence longer than he knew. "They don't want justice," she said. "They want silence again." She had learned how the game worked. You don't crush truth head-on, you starve it, you discredit it. You make the storyteller look unreliable, angry, inconvenient. So Naomi stopped speaking publicly. That was the mistake they made. Because while they were watching her mouth, they forgot about her hands. She wrote, not speeches, not pleas, ledgers, dates, names, patterns, the kind of writing that doesn't argue, it indicts. She passed copies through people who didn't know each other. Churches, dockworkers, women who cleaned houses where powerful men talked too freely after dinner. The story spread sideways, quiet, impossible to grab all at once. One winter evening, a man followed her home. She knew before he did. His footsteps were wrong, too measured, too confident. She turned a corner and stopped suddenly. Let him almost collide with her. They locked eyes. He smiled like he had business with her. "You Naomi." She smiled back, calm, almost bored. "Depends who's asking." He studied her. "You made some folks uncomfortable." Naomi nodded. "That usually means I'm close." His smile faded. "You should let old things stay buried." She stepped closer. Not aggressive, intentional. "You buried them," she said. "I dug them up." He leaned in, voice low. "You think you won?" What? Naomi met his gaze, unblinking. "I don't think in wins," she said. "I think in consequences." She walked past him and didn't look back. Because here, what Bumpy always understood, even before anyone said his name out loud. The real power isn't in violence. It's in knowing that once the truth is loose, nobody ever gets it back under control. And somewhere that night, a man who thought the past was handled realized it wasn't finished with him yet. The game wasn't over. It had just changed players. The smart ones don't come at you loud. They circle. Naomi felt it in the weeks that followed. Doors that used to open easy now paused. Invitations that came late or not at all. Friendly faces turning cautious, like being seen with her had suddenly become a liability. That's how you know you're hurting the right people. One evening, a woman approached her after a church meeting. Mid-30s, clean gloves, careful eyes. "I clean houses on Spruce Street," she said, like it was nothing. "Men talk when they think the help doesn't count." Naomi didn't smile, she didn't rush. "What did you hear?" she asked. The woman leaned in. "They're collecting stories about you, not yours, new ones trying to make you look unstable." Naomi nodded once. Calm, strategic. That means they're scared, she said, because when power can't erase facts, it poisons the source. That night, Naomi burned half her papers, not out of fear, out of control. You don't let enemies decide what survives. She kept the originals hidden somewhere no man with money would think to look. And then she did something dangerous. She went quiet. No letters, no meetings, no trail. Let them think she was tired, broken, done. Weeks passed. Then one night there was a knock, not 2 taps, not polite, 3, firm, authoritative. Naomi didn't move toward the door. She moved to the side, listened to the breathing on the other end, measured it. A man's voice followed. "Miss Naomi, we should talk." She recognized the tone immediately. Not a threat, an assumption. She opened the door just enough to be seen. "Yes," she said. The man was well dressed, city coat, clean boots, the kind of man who never dirtied his hands but knew who did. "You've caused some concern," he said. "People think you're planning something." Naomi tilted her head. "People think a lot of things." He smiled thin. "You should be careful. Stories like yours, they don't end well." She held his gaze. "They already didn't," she said. "I lived through that part." The smile disappeared. He leaned closer. "Last chance, let it go." Naomi stepped back and opened the door wider. "You came all this way," she said calmly, "to tell me to forget." "Yes." She nodded, "Then listen close." Her voice dropped, not loud, certain. "I don't forget," she said. "I outlast." The man studied her for a long second. Then he turned and walked away without another word. Naomi closed the door. Her hands didn't shake, but something in her chest tightened, not fear, anticipation, because she knew the next move wouldn't be words. It never was. And somewhere out there, decisions were being made that would decide whether this story ended quietly or with somebody finally paying the full price. The board was set. And this time, Naomi wasn't the piece. She was the one watching the whole game. Power hates being ignored. That's what finally forced their hand. The pressure didn't come from the streets. It came from rooms with carpet so thick it swallowed footsteps. From men who never raised their voices because they never had to. From women who smiled while making decisions that ruined lives. Naomi felt it when the landlord hesitated taking her rent. When a clerk lost her paperwork. When a friend stopped answering knocks. They weren't attacking her directly. They were shrinking the ground under her feet. That's how smart predators move. Starve you first, make survival expensive, make loneliness feel earned. Naomi adjusted. She slept in different places, kept her bundle close, spoke less, watched more, and then someone made a mistake. A young man approached her near the docks, too young to be careful, too eager to prove himself useful. "They say you got something," he said. "Something people don't want floating around." Naomi didn't answer. "They say if it disappears," he continued, "you get left alone." She studied him, saw the nerves, the borrowed confidence, the way he kept glancing behind him. "Who sent you?" she asked. He hesitated. That was enough. Naomi stepped closer, her voice calm as a closed door. "You tell them this," she said. "If anything happens to me, everything I know goes everywhere." His eyes widened. "You bluffing?" She shook her head slowly. "I prepared." He left fast, too fast. That night Naomi moved the last copy, handed it to someone who didn't know her name, didn't ask questions, and didn't care about money. The kind of person history survives through. When she walked home, the street was quiet, too quiet. A shadow peeled away from the alley across the way. Another followed. Naomi stopped walking. She didn't run. Running tells them you're afraid. She turned, met the darkness head-on. Footsteps approached, measured, confident. A voice spoke from just beyond the light. "You should have stopped," it said. "Now you've made this complicated." Naomi's pulse stayed steady. "No," she replied. "I made it inevitable." A pause, then a sound, metal shifting. A weapon, maybe, or a threat meant to feel like one. The voice spoke again, closer now. "You don't walk away from this." Naomi smiled just slightly in the dark. "Neither do you," she said. And in that suspended moment, right before whatever came next, one truth hung in the air, sharp and unavoidable. Some stories end when the teller dies. Others only start there. Silence stretched. The kind that isn't empty, the kind that decides things. Naomi stood still, hands open, weight balanced. Not brave, prepared. She'd learned a long time ago that panic gives men permission. The shadow shifted, one step closer, close enough now that she could smell tobacco and city leather. "You think you scared us," the voice said. "You just made yourself expensive." Naomi exhaled slow. "You already paid," she replied. "You just don't know it yet." That gave him pause, because men like that expect pleading, or anger, or fear. What they don't expect is confidence with nothing visible to back it up. "Walk away," he said finally. "Last offer." Naomi shook her head once. Small movement, final. "You don't understand the board," she said. "You think this is about me." Another step. The light caught part of his face now, not a killer, a courier, someone sent to see how far things would go. She leaned in just enough for him to hear what came next. "If I disappear," Naomi said, "people you never heard of start talking. Names get matched, dates get connected, churches, newspapers. Northern donors with long memories and loud mouths." His jaw tightened. "You're bluffing," he said again, but weaker this time. Naomi's voice dropped into something colder. "I lived in a place built on bluffs," she said. "This ain't one." For a long second nobody moved. Then footsteps. Not his, another presence nearby, watching, maybe listening, maybe counting. The courier stepped back. One step, then another. "This ain't over," he said. Naomi nodded. "I know." He disappeared into the dark the same way he came, quiet, unfinished. Naomi stood there a moment longer, listening to the city breathe again. Horses, distant voices. Life pretending nothing almost happened. When she finally turned to walk away, she felt it. Not relief. Momentum. Because somewhere tonight someone would report back. Someone would say she didn't scare easy. Someone would recommend a different solution. And Naomi knew what that meant. The game had moved past warnings. Next time they wouldn't come to talk. They'd come to end it. And Naomi. She was already planning 3 moves ahead. The second time they came, they didn't knock. That's how Naomi knew it was serious. Glass doesn't shatter loud when you expect it. It's the quiet that gets you, the pause right after when your body realizes the rules have changed. She rolled out of bed before the sound finished echoing. Didn't scream, didn't freeze. Muscle memory took over. The kind you earn, not learn. Boots hit the floor in her front room. 2 men. Maybe 3 heavy steps. No rush. Professionals don't hurry when they think the end is guaranteed. Naomi slipped out the back, coat already in her hands. She didn't grab the bundle, that was the point. If they were here, it meant the bundle was already somewhere safer than she was. She moved through the alley like a shadow that knew the map. Cut left, then right, duck into a space too narrow for confidence. She heard one of them curse softly, another laugh. They thought this was a chase. It was. 3 blocks down, Naomi stopped. Just stopped. Let the sound catch up. Let them think she was tired. Let them believe what men always believe, that pressure breaks women before it sharpens them. Footsteps slowed behind her. "End of the road," one voice said. Naomi turned. Calm, balanced, eyes steady. "You ever notice," she said, "how the people who do the dirtiest work never know who they're protecting?" One of them scoffed. Another shifted his weight, uncomfortable. "That's not your concern," the first one said. Naomi smiled, not wide, not kind. "It will be," she replied. A whistle cut the air, sharp, deliberate, from the rooftops, from the dark. Suddenly the alley wasn't empty anymore. Men stepped out of shadows that hadn't been there a second ago. Dock workers, night watch, people who didn't ask questions but understood leverage. The 2 men froze. Naomi didn't move. She didn't have to. "Walk away," she said, "or you explain to your bosses why you failed loud." The silence that followed wasn't fear. It was calculation. The men backed off. Slow, careful. Pride intact enough to survive another night. When they were gone, the others melted back into the city like they'd never existed. Naomi stood alone again. But this time she wasn't hunted. She was marked. Marked as someone with reach, with allies, with a story too big to disappear quietly. And somewhere in a room with good lighting and bad intentions, someone finally understood the truth they'd been avoiding. Naomi wasn't a loose end. She was a fuse. And the only question left was, who was going to be standing closest when it finally burned. After that night, the city treated her different. Not friendly, not hostile, respectful. That's the space Bumpy always talked about without ever saying his name. The space where people stop testing you not because they like you but because they've measured the cost. Naomi didn't celebrate, she adjusted. She stopped sleeping in the same place 2 nights in a row. She stopped walking predictable routes. She learned which corners belonged to who and which ones nobody claimed because something bad had already happened there, and she listened. Because the streets always talk, not loud, not clear, but consistent. Men who used to ask questions stopped asking them. Names that circled her for months went quiet. Money that was supposed to move against her stalled. That's when she knew the real conversation had started. Not on the ground, up above, in rooms she'd never be invited into. One afternoon, a message reached her without a messenger. A folded paper slipped under a teacup in a cafe she didn't usually sit in. 5 words. You've made your point, stop. No signature, no threat, no apology, that was the problem. Naomi stared at the paper for a long time, then folded it once and slid it into her coat. That night she didn't hide. She walked openly, head up, pace steady. Let the city see her still breathing, because here, that's what power hates more than resistance. Refusal, they wanted her quiet, they wanted her grateful, they wanted her tired. Instead, she was visible. 2 nights later, someone followed her again. Different footsteps, lighter, smarter. She turned into a lit street on purpose this time. The man approached like he belonged there. You don't know when to stop, he said calmly. Naomi studied him. Clean coat. No weapon showing. Eyes sharp enough to understand consequences. I know exactly when to stop, she replied. Just not when you want me to. He leaned in just enough for the truth to slip. There are people who won't forgive this, he said. Not ever. Naomi's voice stayed low, even. Then they bet her not miss. The man held her gaze, searching for fear. He didn't find it. He stepped back. This isn't over. Naomi nodded once. I know, she said. That's why I'm still standing. He disappeared into the crowd. Naomi stayed where she was for a moment longer, feeling the weight of the board, every piece in motion. She understood something then, clear and sharp. The danger wasn't chasing her anymore. It was waiting, waiting for the moment she slipped. Waiting for the moment she trusted peace. Waiting for the moment she forgot who she'd become. And Naomi promised herself one thing as she walked into the night. She would never give it that moment. The last move never looks like a fight. It looks like normal. That's what made Naomi uneasy. Weeks passed without a whisper. No shadows, no warnings, no folded notes. The city smoothed itself out around her like nothing had ever been wrong. That's when she knew someone had decided to wait her out. Powerful people don't rush revenge. They let time do the softening. Let life convince you the danger moved on. Let you lower your guard because you're tired of carrying it. Naomi didn't. She stayed sharp, stayed light on her feet, but even she couldn't stop time from changing things. Mr. Garrett got sick, quiet sickness. The kind that keeps you in bed and out of the game, one less set of eyes, one less place that felt anchored. Then a fire broke out 2 blocks from where Naomi had been staying. Not her building, close enough to be a message, far enough to be deniable, accidents they'd call it. That night Naomi sat alone and did something she hadn't done in years. She reviewed the end, not her death. The story, where it would land if she disappeared, who would carry it next. How many copies existed now? How many mouths would open if hers closed? She realized something then, quiet, heavy, undeniable. They couldn't erase the past anymore, but they could erase her. And maybe they didn't need to. Maybe the last move wasn't killing her. Maybe it was letting her live long enough to watch the world stay the same. That thought settled in her chest like a challenge. So Naomi made one final adjustment. She didn't hide. She didn't run. She didn't wait. She placed the last pieces where they couldn't be recalled, sent letters timed to open without her, gave names to people who didn't know how dangerous they were yet. Then she walked back into the light, not loud, not begging, just present. If they were going to make an example, she wouldn't let it be small. If they were going to wait, she'd make waiting expensive. And somewhere, maybe in a room full of men who thought patience was ownership, someone felt it. That shift, that understanding. Naomi wasn't a problem to be solved anymore. She was a story already in motion. And stories like that don't need protection. They just need time. The board was quiet now, too quiet, which meant only one thing. Somebody somewhere was about to make the last mistake. The last mistake never announces itself. It wears a clean face, carries good manners, shakes your hand like it's always been on your side. Naomi felt at the morning a letter arrived with proper postage and careful handwriting. No threats, no riddles, just an invitation, a meeting, neutral ground, afternoon, public place. That's how you know someone thinks they're winning. She didn't go alone. She never went alone anymore. But she didn't bring muscle either. Muscle makes men nervous. Calm makes them reckless. The cafe was busy enough to feel safe. That was the trick. Safety makes people talk too much. He was already there, mid-40s, well-dressed, the kind of man who didn't carry fear because he rented it out to others. "You look well," he said, standing halfway, polite, controlled. Naomi sat without returning the courtesy. "You didn't bring an apology," she said, "so let's skip the warm part." He smiled thin. "You forced a conversation." "No," Naomi replied. "I forced a reckoning. You're late." That threw him just a fraction, enough. He leaned in. "You've done impressive damage, but damage isn't the same as change." Naomi nodded. "True, change takes pressure." "And pressure," he said, "breaks people." She met his eyes steady. "Only the ones built wrong." He sighed like a man tired of pretending restraint was mercy. "You want justice," he said. "That word makes noise. Noise brings consequences." Naomi leaned back, finally letting him feel how little leverage he had. "I don't want justice," she said. "I want memory. I want names to stay heavy. I want men like you to hesitate before you decide someone is disposable." He studied her now, really studied her. "You think you're untouchable." "No," Naomi said. "I think I'm inconvenient." That was the moment he understood. Inconvenience is poison to power. You can't jail it clean, can't bury it quietly, can't erase it without making a mess. He stood. "This ends one way or another," he said. Naomi stood too. "It already did," she replied. "You're just catching up." She walked out first. Behind her, he stayed seated, staring at a table that suddenly felt unstable. Because somewhere between threats and negotiations, he'd realized the truth too late. Killing Naomi wouldn't stop the story. Ignoring her wouldn't either, and the worst part, she wasn't asking permission anymore. She was counting who blinked first. The city swallowed her as she stepped back into the street. Same buildings, same noise, same world pretending it hadn't shifted, but Naomi felt it. That subtle tilt, that quiet panic moving upward. Because the people who once decided who mattered were starting to realize they were no longer in control. And control, once cracked, never seals the same way again. Somewhere far above street level, a decision was being rushed. And rushed decisions always spill blood, not hers, someone else's. Rushed decisions make sloppy footprints. Naomi felt them before she saw them. The city had a nervous rhythm now, men moving without coordination, messages crossing each other, power leaking through cracks because somebody upstairs panicked and skipped a step. That's when people get sacrificed, not enemies, assets. A warehouse fire down by the river made the morning papers. Electrical, they said, tragic, unavoidable. 3 men didn't make it out. Naomi read the names in a quiet diner and felt the shift settle into her bones. They weren't random. Those were the men who knew too much and talked too little. The ones who'd been sent to scare her, not kill her. Middle layers, disposable. That told her everything. When power starts burning its own buffers, it means the top is exposed. Someone had decided the cost of cleaning this up was higher than the cost of leaving evidence behind. And that meant the clock had sped up. Naomi didn't mourn those men. That part of her had burned out years ago. But she did note the lesson. The people who threaten you first are rarely the ones who pay last. She moved again, not out of fear, out of timing. 2 days later, a messenger found her where she wanted to be found. Young, nervous, carrying words like they weighed more than his pockets. "They want you to disappear," he said. "Not dead, quiet, somewhere far, new name, new life." Naomi almost smiled. That offer only comes when killing you becomes too risky. "Who they?" she asked. The boy shook his head fast. "I don't know names." "That's a lie," Naomi said gently. "You just don't know which one matters." He swallowed. "They say this ends if you take it." Naomi leaned back, eyes distant for a moment. "That's the problem," she said. "It doesn't end, it just pauses." She stood, handed him a folded paper. "Give them this." He hesitated. "What is it?" "Proof," Naomi replied, "that if I vanish, everything surfaces at once. No filters, no delays." The boy's eyes widened. "They won't like that." Naomi nodded. "That's how I know it'll reach them." He left fast. That night Naomi didn't sleep. She sat by the window and watched the city breathe. Lights on, lights off. People thinking tomorrow was promised. She thought about Mama Ruth, about Clara, about Aunt Bee, about names that never made headlines but carved grooves into her life. She wasn't fighting anymore. She was collecting interest. Just before dawn, a carriage stopped outside her building. Too clean, too confident, a man stepped out alone. Older, heavy coat, no hurry. The kind of man who didn't expect resistance because resistance usually arrived late. He looked up at her window. Naomi didn't hide. They locked eyes across the street like two chess players who finally saw the endgame. He tipped his hat once. Respect or surrender, hard to tell. Naomi closed the curtain. Because now the danger wasn't chasing her. It was negotiating. And that meant the next move wouldn't be loud. It would be permanent. The kind of move that decides who history protects and who it finally turns its back on. Negotiation is just violence wearing a better suit. Naomi understood that the moment she stepped into the room they chose. Neutral ground, they called it. A rented office above a dry goods store. Clean walls, no windows, a place designed so nothing lingers. 3 men waited, not guards, decision makers. The older one spoke first. Calm, practiced. "You've proven your point," he said. "You've cost people money, sleep, stability." Naomi didn't sit. She stayed standing, weight centered, eyes steady. "I didn't come to prove anything," she said. "I came to finish it." That unsettled them. Not anger, certainty does that. Another man leaned forward, younger, nervous. "You can't win this outright." Naomi nodded. "I know, that's why I'm not playing to win." Silence. The older man studied her like he was trying to remember where he'd miscalculated. "What do you want?" Naomi finally sat, slow, controlled. "I want the house erased," she said. "Not burned, not abandoned, exposed, names attached, money traced, churches forced to answer why they looked away." One of them laughed softly. "A mistake. That would take years," he said, "and you wouldn't live to see it." Naomi met his eyes. "I already lived through worse than not seeing the ending." The older man raised a hand, stopping the laughter. "You understand what you're asking," he said. "This would unravel people far above us." Naomi leaned in, voice low and lethal. "Good," she said. "They've been comfortable too long." Another pause, longer this time. Finally, the older man spoke again. "If we agree, you disappear." Naomi shook her head once. "If you agree, I stay." That landed hard. "Visible," she continued. "Alive, speaking when I choose, quiet when I choose. You don't get to put me in a drawer and call it peace." The men exchanged looks, the kind that decide who gets blamed later. "You're asking us to lose control," the younger one said. Naomi stood. "No," she corrected. "I'm telling you it's already gone. I'm just offering you a way to survive the fallout." She turned toward the door. Behind her, the older man spoke. "If you walk out, there's no guarantee." Naomi paused, didn't look back. "There never was," she said. She stepped into the hallway. Her heartbeat stayed slow, measured. But deep inside, something shifted, not relief, not fear. Commitment. Because once you force power to choose between exposure and collapse, it doesn't forgive. It waits. And Naomi knew, as she walked back into the city's noise that whatever answer they reached, someone was going to bleed for it. The only question left was whether it would be her, or one of the men who'd spent their whole lives believing they were untouchable. Waiting is the most dangerous phase. That's when people convince themselves they've survived. Naomi felt the city lean back like it had exhaled too early. No messages, no watchers she could spot, no pressure on her routines. The kind of quiet that isn't peace, just a held breath. She didn't slow down. She met people she wasn't supposed to meet. Sat in rooms where the chairs faced each other on purpose. Let her name be said out loud, not whispered. Visibility is a weapon when used right. It makes sloppy hands hesitate. Then the answer came, not spoken, demonstrated. A newspaper ran a piece that shouldn't have made print, buried on page 4. Careful wording, no accusations, just questions, land records, church donations. A pattern of money that bent the wrong way for too many years. Naomi read it standing up. That wasn't surrender, that was a test. They were checking how loud the world would react, how fast it would move, who would flinch first. 2 nights later, a woman Naomi didn't know knocked on her door. Middle-aged, tired eyes, dressed like she'd lived carefully for a long time. "They told me to give you this," the woman said, handing over an envelope. No return name. Inside was a single sentence typed clean and sharp. "You're about to learn how deep this goes." Naomi folded the paper once. Then again, calm. She walked to the window and looked down at the street. A carriage idled across the way longer than it should have. A man sat inside, hat low, pretending not to look up. That wasn't a threat, that was a marker. Someone had decided she was no longer just inconvenient, she was central. Naomi closed the window, heart steady, mind already moving. Because when power tells you how deep it goes, it isn't warning you. It's inviting you to step closer. And Naomi had learned a long time ago. If you're going to stand in the middle of the board, you don't back away when the pieces start closing in. You hold your ground and make them show their hand. Somewhere tonight, a file would be opened that hadn't seen light in decades. And when it did, someone who thought the past was buried was about to realize it had teeth. Depth changes things. Naomi learned that the night the second paper hit. This one didn't whisper. It asked questions in full sentences. Names half-printed, dates that lined up too clean to be coincidence. A pastor quoted and backtracked in the same paragraph. A donation trail that bent south and never came back straight. People felt it before they understood it. You could hear it in the city's voice. Louder steps, quieter conversations. Doors closing earlier than usual. That's when the first ally vanished. Not killed, not arrested, just gone. A woman who cleaned offices and listened well. Her room emptied like she'd never lived there. Rent paid ahead. No forwarding word. That was the message. Naomi didn't rush. Rush is how you make yourself small. She waited until dusk and went where waiting didn't belong, right into the open. A lecture hall, full house, gas lamps burning like witnesses. She stood at the back and listened while men debated morality as if it were weather. When the room warmed to its own comfort, Naomi stepped forward. She didn't shout, she didn't beg. She read names, just names. The room changed temperature. A cough here, a chair scraping there. Someone stood to interrupt, then thought better of it. Power hates specifics. Names don't argue, they land. When she finished, she folded the paper and thanked them for listening. Outside, the street swallowed her again. That's when she felt it, the weight behind her steps. Not one shadow, 2, maybe more. The kind that doesn't chase because it doesn't need to. She cut left into a narrower street. The steps followed, patient. Naomi stopped under a lamp. "Come on," she said, not turning. "If you're going to do it where the light remembers." Silence, then a voice older, steadier than the rest. "You were offered a way out." Naomi turned. 3 men now, close enough to count breaths. "I was offered a drawer," she said. "I don't fit in those." The older man studied her like a problem that refused to simplify. "You don't understand the consequences." Naomi smiled, small and precise. "I understand them better than you. I just decided they weren't mine alone anymore." Another pause, a decision forming. From the corner of her eye, Naomi caught movement, someone watching the watchers. A figure across the street pretending to fumble with keys. Another at the end of the block lingering too long. The balance shifted. The older man exhaled. "This isn't finished." Naomi nodded. "It never is." They backed away, careful now, not defeated, recalibrating. Naomi walked on, pulse steady, mind already indexing faces and angles. She knew what came next: pressure from above, sacrifice below, a move meant to scare the crowd back into their seats. And somewhere, right now, a ledger was being pulled from a shelf that hadn't been touched in years. When it opened, it wouldn't just name the dead. It would name the living. And that's when the city would have to decide who it was willing to protect. The light behind Naomi clicked off. Ahead, the street narrowed again. And this time, the danger didn't follow. It waited. Waiting is louder when you know it's watching. Naomi felt it the next morning, not fear, not dread, pressure, like the city itself had leaned in, curious how this was going to end. She kept her routine anyway, that was the point. Same cafe, same corner table, same measured sip of bitter coffee that reminded her she was still here. Two men argued politics near the door. Loud, performative. They weren't the danger. The danger was the man reading a paper upside down across the room, pretending he didn't know how to read at all. Naomi clocked him without looking. Outside, a carriage rolled past once. Then again, too slow, too clean. By noon, the third paper hit. This one didn't hedge. It didn't soften language. It named institutions. It printed numbers. It asked why certain properties existed on no maps and why certain doctors left town every few months with envelopes thicker than luggage. The city didn't gasp. It murmured. That's worse. Because murmurs travel. By dusk, someone finally blinked. A boy ran up to Naomi near the market, breathless, eyes wide, too young to be brave, too scared to lie well. "They're burning things," he said. "Books, records, church files, anything with dates." Naomi nodded. "That means it's working." "They're blaming someone," the boy whispered. "Not the right ones." Of course they were. Power never points the blade at itself first. "Who?" Naomi asked. The boy swallowed. "A clerk, old, no family. They say he stole. Say he acted alone." Naomi felt something cold settle behind her ribs. A sacrifice, necessary in their minds, clean, contained. "Where is he now?" she asked. The boy shook his head. "They moved him, quiet." Naomi looked toward the river, toward the warehouses, toward places where truth went to drown if nobody pulled it back out. "Listen to me," she said, voice low, firm. "You didn't see me today. You didn't talk to me. You forget my face." The boy nodded fast and ran. Naomi stayed where she was for a moment longer, letting the weight of the next move press down. Because now the game had changed again. This wasn't about stopping her. It was about rewriting the ending. And Naomi knew something they didn't. You can burn paper. You can bury men. You can even bend headlines. But once enough people smell the lie at the same time, the truth stops needing protection. She turned and walked toward the river, coat pulled tight, steps steady. Somewhere ahead, someone innocent was being set up to carry a sin too big for his back. And Naomi had a choice to make. Walk away and let the machine eat another name, or step directly into the gears and force them to grind in the open. She didn't slow down, because whatever waited by that water tonight, it was about to learn she wasn't done deciding who paid. The river didn't care who you were. It moved the same whether you were guilty or chosen. Naomi walked its edge with her coat pulled tight, boots steady on damp stone. The warehouses stood quiet, windows dark, like men pretending not to hear what they already knew. She didn't rush. Rush tells the wrong people where to look. She listened. Voices carry different by water, echo wrong, lie about distance. Naomi caught pieces, an argument cut short, a door slammed too carefully, a cough that lingered too long for comfort. She slipped between two buildings and stopped. A truck idled ahead. No markings, back doors closed. Two men stood nearby, smoking like they had time, like nothing in the world was about to tip. Then she saw him, the clerk, older, thin. Coat hanging wrong on his shoulders like it didn't belong to him anymore. Hands tied loose enough to look humane, tight enough to matter. He wasn't begging. That hurt worse. Naomi didn't step forward. She stepped smarter. A brick skidded across the ground from the far end of the alley, not thrown hard. Just enough to make noise. One of the men turned, annoyed. "Hey!" Another sound. A shout from the street, someone arguing, a door banging. Distraction works best when it feels accidental. One man walked off to check it. The other stayed, shifting his weight, bored. That's when Naomi moved. She came up behind him, quiet as thought, pressed cold steel she'd never planned to use into his ribs, just enough to convince him this night had changed. "Don't turn," she said, calm, certain. "Don't speak." His breath caught, smoke drifted from his fingers. "You don't know who I am," he whispered. Naomi leaned in. "You don't know who's watching." She nodded once toward the riverbank where shadows had started to separate themselves from darkness. Dock men, night workers. Faces that recognized injustice quicker than law ever did. The man stiffened. "Untie him," Naomi said. He hesitated. The shadows stepped closer. The rope came off fast. The clerk staggered, confused, eyes wide. Naomi caught his arm before he could fall. "Walk," she told him. "Don't run. Running makes noise." They moved together toward the light, toward people who didn't ask questions until after danger passed. Behind them, a shout went up. Angry, panicked. Naomi didn't look back, because this wasn't rescue. It was exposure. By morning, the story would be wrong in all the right ways. Witnesses contradicting. Men disappearing before statements could be signed. A clerk who wasn't supposed to speak it telling everything. Naomi stood at the edge of the crowd as sirens finally arrived late, like they always do. The clerk was alive. That was the mistake, because now there was a face to go with the lie. And somewhere, someone who thought this would end clean realized the mess had just gone public. Naomi melted back into the city, pulse steady, mind already turning. She hadn't saved the world. She just made it impossible to pretend. And the people who hated that the most, they were done waiting. Next time, they wouldn't try to bury the truth. They'd come straight for the woman who kept dragging it into the light. After the river, the city stopped pretending. Sirens showed up faster now, not to help, just to be seen helping. Men in clean coats asked careful questions, the wrong kind. Questions that already had answers attached. Naomi stayed invisible on purpose. That's another rule Bumpy understood before anyone taught it. When the heat turns real, you don't disappear in panic. You disappear in plain sight. People talked for her now. The clerk talked. Dock workers talked. A preacher talked too much and tried to walk it back. Stories overlapped in ways lies hate. Every version slightly different but pointing the same direction, upward. That's when the first body turned up. Not Naomi's. A man found in his office late one night. Official cause, heart failure. Unofficial truth, pressure. The kind that doesn't leave marks but leaves silence behind. Naomi read the notice in the paper and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no fear, confirmation. Because when powerful men start dying quietly, it means somebody at the top decided to cut weight. She knew what came next. They wouldn't send messengers anymore. They wouldn't negotiate. They wouldn't warn. They'd send someone who didn't know her name and didn't need to. That night, Naomi didn't go home. She walked until the city thinned and the lights spaced out enough to create gaps. She chose a street where echoes told the truth. She felt him before she saw him. One set of steps. Even, trained. No anger in them, no hesitation either. She stopped under a broken lamp. "Don't," a voice said from behind her. Low, professional. Naomi turned slowly. He was young, younger than she expected. That's always how it happens. The ones who pull the trigger never own the decision. "You've done enough," he said. "This ends clean." Naomi studied his face, saw the calculation, the distance he needed to keep between himself and what he was about to do. "Who told you that?" she asked. He didn't answer. She nodded. "That figures." They stood there, the moment stretched thin. No shouting, no speeches. Then Naomi said the last thing he expected. "They're not going to protect you after this." That landed. They'll tell you you were following orders. Then they'll forget your name the same way they forgot theirs. His jaw tightened. "You don't know that." Naomi took one small step closer, not threatening, honest. "I know exactly that," she said, "because that's how they've always done it." Somewhere nearby, a door opened. A window shifted. Life reminded him he wasn't alone. The man hesitated. That was all it took. A shout from the corner, another set of footsteps. Too many witnesses now, too many variables. He backed away. One step, then another. "This isn't finished," he said. Naomi nodded. "I know." He vanished into the dark, mission incomplete, hands still clean enough to lie about later. Naomi exhaled once, slow, because now there was no doubt left. They had crossed the final line, and once that happens, there's only one way these stories end. Not with peace, with exposure so complete that nobody involved can ever stand comfortably in the light again. The city hummed around her, unaware it had just witnessed a turning point. Naomi walked on, calm, deliberate, already planning the aftermath. Because the truth wasn't running anymore, it was hunting. Endgames don't explode, they tighten. Naomi felt it in the city's posture, shoulders up, voices clipped, too many men trying to look ordinary at the same time. Power was no longer confident, it was defensive. That's when it makes mistakes you can't take back. The next morning it broke, not with a headline screaming guilt, with documents, ledgers, deeds, payment schedules that didn't match sermons. Medical invoices tied to addresses that officially didn't exist. They hit all at once. Different papers, different cities, no single source to silence, no single throat to close. Church boards froze, bank men resigned overnight. A respected charity dissolved itself before anyone could ask questions. One name, high, protected, untouchable for decades, vanished from public view like it had been quietly buried with honors no one announced. That was the tell. You don't disappear like that unless the ground underneath you collapses. Naomi didn't watch the fallout from a distance. She walked through it, calm, unhurried, let people see her face attached to the story they could no longer deny. Someone tried to corner her outside a meeting hall. "This ends now," the man hissed. "You got what you wanted." Naomi looked at him like he was behind the times. "No," she said. "This ends when nobody can pretend it was just one bad man." That afternoon the clerk testified publicly, not polished, not protected, just honest and shaking and alive. Names spilled out that weren't supposed to touch air. The room went quiet in that specific way that means history just crossed a line it can't uncross. That night, Naomi got the call she knew was coming. No threats, no negotiation, just 6 words spoken flat into the receiver. "They're cutting everyone loose." She closed her eyes once. That meant scapegoats, that meant chaos, that meant someone desperate enough to try and balance the scales with blood instead of silence. She left where she was and walked into the open. Lamps, people, noise, visibility turned all the way up. Halfway down the block she felt it again, not footsteps, focus. The kind that narrows a room down to one outcome. She didn't turn, she didn't run, she slowed. Because when the last move comes, you don't flinch. You let the world see who chose what. Somewhere behind her a weapon shifted. A breath tightened and the city held still. The breath never came. That was the moment Naomi knew it was over. Not because mercy arrived, because calculation did. Whoever stood behind her understood the same thing she did in that frozen second, that pulling the trigger wouldn't end the story, it would finish it. Loud, permanent, uncontainable, witnesses everywhere, windows open, names already loose in the world with nowhere left to hide. The weapon lowered. Footsteps backed away into the noise, swallowed by the city that suddenly refused to look the other way. Naomi kept walking. She didn't turn around. She didn't need confirmation. Power had already blinked, and once it does, it never regains its old posture. The days that followed weren't clean. They never are. Men resigned for health reasons. Institutions rebranded overnight. Apologies were issued without admitting guilt. A few careers collapsed hard enough to make noise. Others simply vanished, cushioned by money and distance. No miracles, no perfect justice, just damage where certainty used to live. Naomi didn't celebrate. She watched. She watched how people spoke softer around certain topics now. How jokes stopped mid-sentence. How doors that used to close automatically hesitated just a fraction when her name came up. That hesitation was the victory. She left the city quietly after that. No announcement, no disappearance, just movement. Stories like hers don't end with statues or speeches. They end with influence. Years later, someone would ask about her, a professor, a journalist, a young woman reading the wrong records in the right order. They'd hear different versions. Some would say she died, some would say she vanished, some would say she never existed the way people claimed. None of them would be able to prove it. But every now and then, a project would get canceled without explanation. A deal would fall apart at the last minute. A powerful man would hesitate before deciding someone was disposable, and nobody would know why, except Naomi. Because the real endgame was never revenge, it was memory. It was making the cost of silence too high to afford ever again. And somewhere, long after the danger passed, Naomi stood in a place with open sky and no bells, listening to the wind move through things that were finally allowed to grow. Calm, unclaimed, untouchable. The game didn't beat her, it learned her name.